The following lecture is Why Korean American Ethnic Studies. The Korean American Studies source approved by Anaheim Union High School District uh, in 2023, California, by Dr. Jeff Kim. Dr. Kim currently teaches in the Anaheim Union High School District. He has authored a Korean American and Asian American Studies course for his district since 2023. He serves as a board member of Irvine Unified School District. The California Council awarded him the Roy Erickson Civic Education Leadership Award for Social Studies. Thank you, Dr. Kim.
Thank you for the warm welcome, President Sung. Glad to be here as well. And I just want everyone to know who's in this space. I was also a student in this space. President Sung was my teacher. Miss Ginny was my facilitator. So I had a great opportunity to learn with you all. I'm glad to share out today. I'm actually at the AAPI Lead Summit today. It's the first national gathering of elected Asian American Pacific Islander elected officials. I'm there right now. I was just shaking Andrew Ying's hand, presidential candidate, a couple years back. And so I'm just coming right from there, but so glad to be here. So many folks in here. There are about maybe 1,300 elected officials that are Asian American all across the United States of America, from school board members to city council, mayors, Congress. But so many of them were saying, oh, I'm the first Korean American woman. I'm the first Chinese American woman. I'm the first Asian American in my county. So many were sharing their first, and it's just an opportunity to be so proud of this great representation. I'm also representing as a school board member here at the conference for the Irvine Unified School District. But at the same time, it's a little bit, it's a hopeful story too, because why is it the first? Why are there so many of these firsts happening like now in 2024? Just within the last couple of years. And part of that story comes, and we can understand that story when we understand a little bit of the history as well. So we're going to be talking a little bit about some of these stories of resilience, because these firsts, they're even more impressive because when we look at the past, it's all connected, right? We can go to the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, the 1907 Gentlemen's Agreement, the 1924 Immigration Act, the 1913 Alien Land Laws, the internment of Japanese Americans, Saigu, you probably learned about that in this conference, which was 32 years ago, and then 2020, the surge in anti-Asian racism here in California and across the country. And so the fact that we have so many elected officials representing and being in these spaces, it's just a great story of resilience. In light of these firsts is the backdrop of some of the challenges that have been overcome. So these are all connected to the stories of resilience. If you leave with anything today, I hope you leave with these 4 words. And now I'm going to put on my educator hat. I'm going to take off my board hat and put on my educator hat as launching the first Korean American Ethnic Studies course in the United States of America. There are 4 words that I want you to remember that I hope you'll take away. Know, tell, listen, and do. That's kind of the heart of what I'll be sharing. And this is for Korean American Studies, but this could be for any course really. And that's for students to be able to know their story, for them to tell their story civilly, to have others listen with empathy and respect, and then with that story of resilience, do something good with it. If we could forward the slide one. So I thought, I get a little class participation. Once again, I am an educator, so if you could read the bold and underline. I'm going to read the first part and then the bold and underline. So I'm going to ask everyone to unmute. And then when I get to that part where you have to know your roots, if everyone can read that together in one voice, it'll be, I know, a little chaotic, but I would love to hear your voices as well. So in order for the tree to grow tall,
you have to know your roots.
Yeah, that's a lot of applause, everybody. Wonderful. I don't know if many of you have seen the sequoia trees. I'm sure many of you have. If not, I'm sure you've seen pictures. They're so beautiful, so tall, so strong. In order to grow tall like this, you have to know your roots. And so you can see, knowing your Korean American story is very important, but side by side that Korean American story, with these sequoia trees, what's interesting is the roots actually don't go down that deep into the ground, but what they do is they go out and across, intersecting and connecting with all these other sequoia trees. So you'll never see them growing in silos, you'll see them growing in growth. And so side by side, the Korean American story is Japanese American stories, Chinese American stories, Asian American stories, Black and Latino stories, African American stories. It's all intersecting and connecting. For example, I'm not African American, but when I think about Martin Luther King and the work of the African American community in the civil rights movement, wow, what an amazing story of resilience. In fact, I think if the 1964 Civil Rights Act didn't pass, then the 1965 Immigration Act, which impacted so many Korean Americans coming to the United States, I don't know if that would have happened either. So our stories are interconnected in so many ways. And I'm proud to know that story. And I'm proud to allow that story to add to my story of resilience, even though I'm not African American. I'm not Hispanic Latino as well. But when I know Sylvia Mendez's story, and if you've heard of the Mendez versus Westminster case out here in California, in Westminster, Orange County, before the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education, of course, law that desegregated schools, it was Mendez versus Westminster. I had the chance to meet Sylvia Mendez as well. What an amazing story of resilience. I'm not Latino or Latin American, Hispanic, but at the same time, what a great, amazing story of resilience. And when I know that story, it strengthens my own story. So if I were to ask you, could you name a Korean American that made a difference for the United States? A lot of people would struggle. A lot of people would struggle to even name one, though there are many, many that made a difference. And you've been learning about that in this institute. So thank you for all your dedication and time. President Sung for bringing and gathering together all these scholars to one by one share the things that are worth sharing. There are many culturally honoring things in our entire country, but also in the Korean American community. But it's only culturally honoring. It's only a cultural blessing if we know how to culturally honor it. So thank you for learning so that we can honor these stories. Next slide, please. So I'm going to kind of reach out to you. Or actually, before that, I thought I'd share a little bit about myself. First of all, I'm a father. I have 5 children, all of them daughters. My eldest is in college. And then I have 2 in high school, 1 in middle, and 1 elementary. So that's a little bit of my story. I am an educator. I've been an educator in Anaheim Union High School District for the past 22 years. And I've had the privilege of being in a lot of different roles, including instructional coach, civic lead, and also adjunct professor at various universities close by. Next slide, please. Actually, if you go back that one slide, I do have a YouTube channel where I do share out on some of the stories of the Korean American experience and other things, other instructional related things. So if you're interested in that, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Ed Family, short for education. And I have a playlist called Korean American Studies, Ethnic Studies, if you're interested. Let's go ahead and move up one slide. I'm going to ask you a question now. Why do you think it's important for students to know their story? I know for myself, growing up, or as a teacher, I had a student come into my class one time, and that student said, "Oh, I'm so proud that you're my teacher." And this person was a Korean American, but I was thinking in my mind, this student is not in my class, but the student stopped by my classroom and said, "I'm so proud that you're my teacher." And at first I thought about it, and then I realized, you know what? I don't think I ever had a chance to have a teacher that looked like me in all my K through 12 education. I never had a teacher that looked like me. And then I probably couldn't even name one Korean American that made a difference in the United States in all my K through 12 education. And it wasn't until I took some college classes where I started to learn a little bit more. And that was a long time ago. But sadly, that's perhaps oftentimes the case today too, where a lot of students don't know their own story. They don't know their story. They don't know their parents' story. And that's for a variety of reasons. In Korea, as you've been learning, the triple trauma, right? Between 1910 to 1945, Korea being a colonized nation, 1950 to 1953, the Korean War, a great civil war, which decimated 10% of the Korean population. And then after that, it is the Hallyu movement, but with that growth comes some pain too. And the migration story is oftentimes painful. So a lot of parents they've not talked about these stories, their stories of resilience. Our grandparents have not talked about these stories with their own children. So many students do not know their parents' story. They do not know their parents' story. So why is it important for students to know their story? Why is it important for students to tell? Like once they learn it, like let's say you created for them a space to learn. Why is it important for them to tell their story, like with their words, right? A lot of Asian American students and myself as well is really shy growing up, and I would hope that I would never be called on actually. So I didn't have a chance to, really speak up too much in class, and it made it harder for me later in life. But I think we want to give students lots of opportunities to speak up in class. If they're speaking up in your class, that's a powerful, powerful thing, because sometimes when you speak, when you say it, it's not just saying what you know, but it's also creating a kind of agency, like this feeling like I can do something about my situation. Like once you say it out loud, there's some power that comes from that. And of course, saying it with like whatever your story is, with compassion and thoughtfulness and wisdom, right? And then why is it important for others to listen to your story with empathy and respect? I mean, we live in one of the most culturally blessed nations of the world. Imagine if we knew each other's stories or different backgrounds, right? Like how powerful would that be? It really could be that we the people, right? And then that in order to form a more perfect union, we know each other's stories. That'd be so powerful. So we want to have a chance to listen to each other's stories. Sometimes we don't even know the names of other students in our class, much less their story. And then doing something good with their story. We've been blessed with this story of resilience. Like we talk to our parents, they have a story of resilience. How can we integrate that and allow that to be a source of resilience for us? Just like Sylvia Mendez has been for me, or Martin Luther King Jr. for me, but where are some other spaces? So once again, this is all part of that know, tell, listen, and do. Next slide, please. Yeah, so once again, for myself, I never had a teacher that looked like me. I didn't know really my own story. So even myself growing up, I didn't have a chance to really know my own story. I really kind of didn't know my parents' story as well. And, this is an important thing for young people right now. They need to be, they're asking the question, who am I? And it's doubly if you're a person of color, like, who am I? Am I Korean? Am I American? What am I, right? And they're not able to draw in from the assets of all their experiences. They haven't been given that space. Sometimes there's even a language barrier with your parents. So, I'm second generation Korean American. My 5 children are third generation Korean American. But I'll tell you for myself, I'm limited in my Korean proficiency, my ability to speak Korean. Like I can, but it's limited to some degree. And so I can't have those as much of deep conversations as I would want to have. So there's a lot of those questions that who am I? I'm still thinking about, still wanting to know more about, but then it's definitely creating that space for that, because when we do know our story, it creates that story of resilience. Next slide, please. In the United States in 2020, there were 2 pandemics. The one that we're probably most familiar with is COVID-19. And the second one is the pandemic of racism, a little lesser known. Here in Orange County, where we actually have a lot of Asian Americans, OC Human Relations reported in their 2020 report that there was a 1,800 increase in hate incidents toward Asian Americans. 1,800%, right? Here in Orange County. So when I saw that happening, it did not make me feel good, obviously. And a little sad, but I don't know if it's maybe because I grew up and I heard racist remarks, or I've seen that in my life toward myself and toward others. Maybe I didn't really speak up or do anything about it then. But then you started seeing it started getting worse, right? From there, it wasn't just like calling somebody a name, but we saw like elderly people, like I'm talking like you saw it in that middle photo, it's like a 91-year-old man, right? Being like with young people hurting them. And you've probably been learning a little bit about filial piety and the Korea Institute, this respect for elders, right? And so seeing that, I was like, man, they can't stand up for themselves, and yet their bones are being broken, they're being killed, right? There has to be a lot of hate happening for you to go up to an old person and to do that. Had it been any other group, I wonder if there would have been more outrage in this country. And then the 6 women shot in Atlanta, murdered, right? At that point, can it get, we know that things can get worse, right? So I thought in my mind, but so there's a lot of fear and anger in this country at this time. People were experiencing fear and anger, and then they were reacting that out of fear and anger, right? But then I asked myself, how can I respond out of love and wisdom? Like yes, we want to acknowledge the fear, we want to acknowledge the anger, but how can I respond out of love and wisdom? And that's when I decided, you know what? I'm going to write the Asian American Studies and Korean American Studies course, because I think if we know each other's stories, it would be, wouldn't say going to solve the situation, but you would be a step in the right direction. Next slide, please. So I went ahead and during the pandemic started to build out this course. Once again, I'm not an expert like President Sung is, but I tried my best to put this course together because, and I realized that the Korean American story is a great American story. It's for Korean Americans and all Americans, right? There's a lot to be proud of. So I broke up this course into 5 different pieces. Part 1 is for students to kind of get to know and tell their stories through ethnographies. You can see a little sample in the video clip later down the line. Second is, I think I just saw the famous Dr. Edward Chang giving his presentation. Well, it was his book that I was using, Korean Americans, A Concise History. So it's like about 100 pages. So if you have not read that book, I highly recommend. You're not just going to learn Korean American history. It's like American history, but then you're going to see the intersection, which is like super cool in my opinion. But anyways, it's broken up into like 7 or 8 different chapters. So I broke the class up into jigsaw. It's only like less than 10 pages per chapter. So then they can create little like reports, each of them, right? And so then they would create reports. We did a little jigsaw, and we had a chance to go through the entire book and kind of get the timeline of the entire Korean American studies or Korean American history. So we know that Korean American history, we just celebrated 120 years of Korean migration, 70 years of alliance with Korea, the United States recently. But Korean history goes back, thousands of years. So many people are familiar, or they might know about Korean history, but not as many know about Korean American history, Korean American studies, Korean American experiences. So this course is about, it is connected to Korea, but then it's looking at Korean Americans specifically. And that's why that Korean Americans, A Concise History children's book is so important. Part 3 of the course was looking at Korean American stories of resilience. So once again, I mentioned, could you name a Korean American that made a difference in the United States? Like I'm sure many of you could in this room because you've been studying this, but outside of this space, very few could name like Tosa Najung Ho or Dr. Sam and Colonel Young Ho Kim and so many others, right? But there is a model ethnic studies curriculum that has been written, and I'm going to direct you to a website if you want to highlight one of those stories later down the line, because although I launched the Korean American Ethnic Studies course, that doesn't mean you can, before I taught that Korean American Ethnic Studies course, I was actually teaching components of that course in a high school world history class, because there's a lot of intersection. I was teaching it in cross-cultural classes as well, cross-curricular classes. That was part 3, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Part 4 is a virtual museum. So now that you got this content, a lot of people, once again, don't know the Korean American story. So I want to give agency to my students. Look, this is the first ever Korean American Ethnic Studies class in the United States. So you have like a duty to share the story. So we created a virtual museum, and I have some student work. Some of that student work's on that YouTube. I found a YouTube channel that I shared about where they give examples of actually the work product of what it is that they created. Because a lot of people are like, what exactly is it? How does this look like, right? In just a little bit, I'm going to show you a little video clip where you can actually see some student work, including the ethnography portion, where the students, at the very beginning of the school year, do something called the My Story introduction, where they begin with telling their story, and then we go deeper and deeper as the course goes on. And then part 5 of this course is now, what are we going to do with our story resilience? So helping students to identify something that they care about and then do something with it. So they're looking at the Korean American studies, they're looking at the data, and they're thinking, what is something that I want to do? So for me, I looked at the data, I saw the 1,800% increase in hate incidents towards Asian Americans, and I want to do something about that. And that was to create the Korean American Ethnic Studies course. Now, whatever it is, whatever the students decide they want to do, I respect them. I respect whatever it is that they want to do, and I'm going to support them. And now they're going to also learn civic engagement and learning. So this course is not just Korean American studies. You can see, first of all, it's a great American story. Second of all, I mean, a lot of college applications, not that college is the most important thing, but in the Korean American community, college, they talk about this a lot. But if you look at the application for college, they actually ask in the Common Apps, for example, a lot of these kind of questions like, oh, tell me your story. Tell me about a challenge you overcame. Tell me about a barrier. Tell me about some of your strengths. Tell me about what you're passionate about. Tell me about what you want to do. That's this course, know, tell, listen, do, right? So as they're learning Korean American studies, I tell them, hey, you're writing your college application too at the same time. So I don't try to make it two separate things, but together as one. I think I do have a video in the next clip, and I think I shared that we did it, but let me go ahead and let's go to the next slide and play that video. It's been exciting what's happened in 2022, the 2022 to 2023 to 2004 academic year.
This fall, the Anaheim Union High School District is offering Korean American Studies.
The Anaheim Union High School District is offering Korean American Studies virtually. The course is believed to be the first ever in the U.S.
So it's a first of a kind.
한인 인종 연구 과목이 오는 가을부터 진행될 예정이라고 밝혔습니다.
NBC4's Ted Chen has those details.
Maybe you've listened to K-pop, but have you ever heard of Young Ok Kim?
You have to know your roots.
They're saying you have to know your roots.
It's not me just learning about Korean history, it's me learning about who I am as a Korean American.
So today I'm going to be talking about my story.
I chose Korean American Studies because as a Korean American student myself, I was never really given the opportunity to learn about my own culture and background.
Growing up as a Korean American, there had always been this sort of gap between my Korean culture and identity and the American culture that I'd grown up with.
Oftentimes families are not talking about their story, and they are certainly not seeing their story as a story of resilience because they're so busy just surviving, just making a living.
But the assignment got families talking. Xiong Lee is a freshman in the class.
I found like having conversations with my mom and things I didn't know about her before.
옛날 생각나고.
I'm reminded of the old days, Heejin says, and the passion for what I did. Xiong says she's not sure when she would have learned all this about her mom. But if her class has taught her anything, it's that some of the most important history is right in front of you.
Kim says the course will cover the immigration of Korean Americans, their settlement in the U.S., and their journey through historic events like the LA riots. He says he hopes the course will benefit students from all backgrounds.
I was initially a little bit nervous about taking a virtual class since I've never taken one before, but I'm really glad that I took this opportunity.
All right, so we did it. We made it happen. We made history for the United States of America. We had 39 students in that class. About 3 out of 4 students were Korean American, but 1 out of 4 were not Korean American, which actually made me very happy because once again, the Korean American story is not just for Korean Americans, but all Americans. And so we saw a lot of intersection because as we're each sharing our stories, we became more connected to one another. Do you think that's an important thing for different groups to understand each other's stories and get along with each other and work together and to respect one another and to communicate and be able to tell their stories? Yes, this would help make a better America. So that was a part of the goal to kind of show an approach that I think would help, through Korean American Studies, but it didn't have to be through Korean American Studies for students to know, tell, listen, and do something good with their stories. So we were able to launch that course. Next slide, please. And so I thought I'd share some of these assignments that helped students to know and tell their stories. One of the very first assignments was something called an ethnography. So it's basically, like a digital resilience journal that allows students to tell their own story. Because I think that's very important for students to know their story and to be able to tell their story. So what would I have to do? It's like 10 Google slides. Actually, if you could vary this up, if you want to implement a lesson like this, I'm just going to show you the 10 that I have right here, but you could put in anything, right? Slide number 1 would be like the My Story introduction, like the slide that you see in the cover right here. You could kind of see a little example of the students. This is actually a great beginning of the year opener. So if you're thinking about a good lesson to start next, it's a little maybe too soon to think it's summer, right? But if you're thinking about a good one to start in the fall, maybe you want to do something like every student creates their My Story, where they talk a little bit about themselves and their slide. They're going to have a chance to introduce themselves to their peers, their friends. You could have it on Google Slides. And then let's say, for myself, in my classes, I have could have up to 40 students per class. Let's say I have 6 classes. We're looking at over 200 students. Sometimes you don't remember all the details, right? At least myself, I struggle with that. So if you have all these slides, then you can always go back and I'm thinking about the student here, and I want to remember what was important to her. So I can go back to that slide, and also serves as a way for me to then build upon her strengths, right? And all the others as well. So anyways, we'll begin that slide number 1. Slide number 2 is like, what does your name mean? A lot of students, even adults, if I would ask you, hey, what does your name mean? Maybe some of you know, maybe some of you don't. But I encourage you to, what is the story of how you were named? Like, that's important. That's important to know, I think. Slide number 3 is a support or family tree. I know some people, they may have had some people that in their family cause some pain. And if there's anyone like that in this group, I'm very sorry about that. So it's more of a support tree, but it could include family members as well. So you're putting people in there who support you and creating something like that. Slide number 4 looks at some of the similarities and differences between generations. Slide 5 is like, how can we be culturally honoring? Like, what are the things worth talking about, right? And you're learning so many in this institute with President Sun and all the guest speakers. Like, what are your takeaways that you're taking away that you think, wow, this is worth a story worth telling to yourself, to your own family, to your classrooms? What are you proud of in your community? A lot of students, like, they might, like, who knows what they're gonna say, right? Some of them might be their nearby, like, grocery store or something like that. That's awesome if they bring that up, right? But maybe they never had a chance to share that before. What are your top 3 strengths? How do you plan to contribute to America? And a dedication slide. And then in our district, we like to also really focus in not just on the content, but on the reflection slide, reflecting about like how you've been growing, including in the 5 C's. We call them like the 5 C's. Stands for communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, compassion, the soft skills, right? So when people enter the workforce, like actually I met like a corporate executive from Amazon at this conference, and I asked them, what are you looking for when you have students like leave high school? They're saying even before college, they should be developing these soft skills. So what do you think? Students are knowing, telling, listening, doing something good about their story. You think they're developing those soft skills that are going to help them for future jobs? Yeah, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at another project. So that's one project, right? One module, one PBL, you could say. Let's go to the next slide and take a look at another one. Okay, I think there's a picture. So just go forward one slide. Maybe there's a picture that will show up. Oh, there we go. And so, by the way, if you have these slides, I think I'm not going to play every single link in these slides, but there's a lot of links to different videos to kind of explain different things. If you didn't want to go to the playlist, the Google Slides will also have the links. But President Sung, you have also had workshops on Shijo poetry, I believe. And I didn't really know what Shijo poetry was actually until a couple of years ago. And then I went to another workshop at UCLA. They talk about Shijo poetry again. I go, you know what? I want to do this. I want to create a Shijo poetry module. Maybe some of you are thinking like, Jeff, like how does this connect to Korean American studies, right? Well, I'm telling you, sometimes it's painful when you're looking eye to eye with your parent to talk about the story. But if you're saying, oh, my teacher gave me this assignment and we need to create this poem together, can you help me? Now the student is like, and the parents are going to work together. It's Shijo poetry. The parents might not even know what Shijo poetry is. Well, a lot of my Korean American students, their parents didn't know what this was. But basically, it's similar to a haiku poem in some ways, but it's actually a little bit longer. First line, 14 to 16 syllables. Second line, the same. Third line, 14 to 16. So it's total 44 to 46 syllables. And then what I want the students to create is I want them to create a Shijo poetry with their parents of their parents' migration story. Right? So obviously not all the details will come out, but the symbolism and the meaning will come out. Some of their parents, a lot of second-gen parents are students, their parents speak Korean, right? Or Korean is the preferred language. And as you know, as you've been learning about the history, a big part of this is because prior to 1965, most Koreans were excluded from coming to the United States. That's why so many of the first generation are primarily Korean speaking, because that's the language that they learned in Korea before coming to the United States. So some of these poems are plurilingual, bilingual, and which I love, by the way, because then you're able to tap into the lingual benefits. And as I believe Miss Ginny here is also a Korean teacher. We know the benefits of bilingualism or plurilingualism. A lot of people think, oh, honor students are the best students, but actually the research has shown that students who are in bilingual programs, plurilingual programs, are the highest achieving students in a cohort group. So a lot of benefits beyond just knowing another language, but also the cultural benefits and story as well. But I think I'll share this sample. This is a mashup of Korean Shijo poetry of many, many different students. Each student created their individual one, which was like, I don't know, about 2 minutes each, and then they would interpret it, like what it means. But this is a mashup of many people. Sometimes I do mashups because it gives a nice sampling, and students like being included. Are we able to show this mashup? If we click on the video itself, we might have to actually click on there we go.
Hello, my name is Millie Kwan, and my 시조 poem is called His New Life.
어릴 적의 꿈을 하늘 높이 날고 싶었지.
잠시 유학이라 하며 처음 밟은 미국 땅. 어릴 적 꿈과 희망이 생각이 나네.
Can I bloom like that flower?
My 시조 poem refers to my parents' immigration story from Korea to the United States.
In distant land, I wander, longing for home embrace.
America's gleam, Ethiopia's sway. Though streets may differ, cultures blend gracefully.
Homeland echoes fade. Young feet cross the ocean's wide divide.
My 시조 poem is about my dad and his immigration to America.
Since I'm the first generation to move to the United States, I've experienced many obstacles.
The story of my family's immigration to the United States is the subject of my 시조 poetry.
I wrote this based off my mom and a glimpse of her childhood. Both of my parents immigrated to America after graduating university in Korea. They had both left everything behind them in their homeland in hopes to create a better life for their future family.
The red sunset takes them back in time to their youth, and they are reminded of their childhood when they were still in Korea.
A flower, leaving my friends behind on a faraway island across the ocean.
This poem captures the complex emotions of transition, growth, and reflection that accompany the significant milestone of graduating high school.
About how I was bullied in school where I felt out of place, I had no connections with any of my classmates, and I felt like an outcast for the most part.
Ignited with hope in my heart, dreams sparkle in my eyes, planting my Korean roots on American soil with courage.
As a child, my dad has always told me that he moved to America when he was young, but never told me why.
Using this story, I compared myself to a flower that is waiting for its time to be opened.
Surrender tempts, but newfound resilience roots deeply. Clarity revitalizes me, and I am born again. And this caused her to be metaphorically reborn as a new person with an indomitable drive. And though it may have not been the original plan for either of my parents, both found a career, family, and home in America.
But if you make an action to achieve that dream, it will soon become a vision.
Describes how she had to accept no matter what kind and how many failures arose. I dedicated my 시조 poem to my grandmother.
This poem is a tribute to my past, and now I can reflect on how this could help me in the future.
I made this poem to remind myself that it's okay to take the time to look at what I've done and take a bit of a break when I have to.
I am so grateful that I have a family and how my parents decided to come to the United States to change our dreams into a vision.
And I'm eternally grateful that they did so because they opened numerous doors for me. And
thanks to this class, I was able to ask him why he chose to come to America. I was really grateful to do so. I learned many aspects that I never thought I would have ever known. So thank you very much, and good night.
Right? Is this a part of knowing and telling your story? I think so. And right now we're listening to these stories, right? Is it impacting you as you listen to these stories? I think I saw in the comments it was impacting some of you, right? That's why the listening to these stories is so important. So do you see this combination of tapping into like the Goryeo dynasty, the Chosun dynasty, which you've been learning about the Shijo poetry, but with the Korean American studies, combining it into one, where you're telling the Korean American studies experience, but then at the same time, you're connecting it to thousands of years of Korean history as well. But of course, you saw in there that you don't have to be Korean or Korean American to do Shijo poetry. And then the migration component, the migration story is an added layer, right? I'm going to tell you like what I did with some of these ethnographies in a little bit, but let me share some more modules. By the way, Hanny Lee, you were just doing an amazing job on point with the slideshow. I'm not in my usual location, and you were rock star. And then Ginny, if I'm going too long on something and you think please give me the warnings if you think I need to give me the cane. I know I can go long sometimes. So you just let me know. So let's go ahead.
Again.
Okay, we'll go to the next one. Now this is another module. So you got all these modules for students to know and tell their stories. If I were to ask some folks in this class, how many of you have a recording of you hearing your parents' story, your parents telling their story, like a recording. Is that something that you think would be valuable to you today and tomorrow, right? So I was able to get one from my mom. Unfortunately, I was able to have something from my dad, but he passed away when I was a young man. So if I wanted to ask more questions, I couldn't, right? So it's the same for our students, maybe the same for some of you, like why it's so important to capture some of these stories, right? Because you want it to be a source of resilience and strength, but if you don't know your own story, and once again, these parents have not told their story to their children oftentimes, and very few people have a recording of it, So I kind of think of it like an oral history or testimonials, where you're kind of getting a life lesson. So the driving question might be, how will I support my family member? It doesn't have to be family, because I know some people, they're living foster youth and, all kinds of challenging situations, but it could be a friend or a mentor, community member. I'd be even willing to share my story, like their life story, right? And so once again, these aren't questions you have to use. A lot of the questions I selected were from the Smithsonian. You just Google Smithsonian oral history and you're going to find like lots and lots of questions. But these are just a couple, right? Like, what's your name? Do I have permission to record your interview? Tell me about the land that you remember from childhood. What else is in your family? And actually, I had a chance to do this with my own mother a couple years ago. So I'm just going to play 1 minute of it, if that's okay. So Hannah, if you could set it up, just 1 minute of it. We're not going to play the whole thing.
AI is smart, but it can also help you get smarter.
AI tools are already helping people. It's likely that whatever career you're in will benefit from AI tools. Try it yourself.
Yeah, for those of you out there who have not recorded, just
course.
follow those questions and get a recording in.
I chose Wix for my business because of its massive scope for functionality and...
Hello, this is Dr. Jeff Kim with Ed Family, and tonight I'm here with my mom, actually, and I will be taking my mom's oral history of her experience in Korea. So let's go ahead and begin at first. What is your name?
내 이름은 김승애입니다.
So my mom's saying her name is Kim Seung-ae. In Korea, the last name Kim is spoken first, and Seung-ae is her first name. Do I have your permission to record this interview?
네.
Yes, so she's saying yes, I do have her permission to record this interview.
별로 안 좋아하지만 아들이 자꾸 하려니까.
So actually, this is not my first time trying to get this interview. I've asked multiple times, and so she's saying, not really, but because I've been asking, and that it's because something that I want, she is permitting this interview. So where and when?
Okay, that's good for this video. So if you want to see the rest of it, it's on that channel. But once again, my mom didn't. I asked her lots of times, and she did not want to do this. All right. So a lot of times, family members at first they're not wanting to, because once again, there's a lot of experiences that make it tough to talk about. You probably have learned about the triple trauma in Korea, but being colonized as a nation, the Civil War. And then the migration experiences, all that trauma makes it very difficult to talk about your stories for Korean Americans, but even for a lot of folks, it could be hard, but especially for Korean Americans as well. So it's tough. So if you haven't gotten a recording like this from your own family, I think it's good for the teachers to model the vulnerability and saying, oh, I did this with my own family first, right? I told my mom, look, I'm asking my kids to do it. Like, how can I ask them to do it if we don't have one together, right? I can't ask my dad, like he passed away already, right? And for those of you who lost a family member and you wouldn't be able to make a recording like this, I'm very sorry for your loss. But if you have a family member that you could do this with, I encourage it, that you could have a recording like this, and then we can also set it up for the next generation so that they have something like this too, because there's not going to be another second generation Korean Americans or first gen. I mean, this season is going to pass, and a lot of those stories are going to disappear. And then if you don't know your story, this, right? Then how can you do something good with your story? It's not a story of resilience. In fact, if you don't know your story, sometimes it's a story of shame. You get embarrassed, right? And so you go the other way, right? It creates division, actually. So that's why knowing your own story is so important. Let's go to the next slide. All right, and so how do I get more deeper into content, right? And so once again, I know for some of you, maybe there's some fear that's there, like, You know, Jeff, I really don't know a lot about Korean American studies, and I would feel a little nervous about starting a lesson. Well, you can see a lot of this is actually the students. The students have a story to tell. They are the content experts in some ways, right? We don't have to know everything. Like they know their story better than I know their story, and they can also research stories on the as well. You know, you heard about the Jigsaw for the children's book, right? The Korean Americans: A Concise History. Well, here's another one. Another example of a student who researched on topic. This one is Saigu. Just like 9/11 is a day that we remember in the United States of America, Saigu 429. 32 years ago, the LA civil unrest, the largest act of violence against Asians in the United States of America. By the way, after those 4 days of a $500 million loss of lives, loss of property, do you know what the Korean American response was after 4 days? It was one of the largest peace rallies you've ever seen in the United States of America. That was the Korean American response. And afterwards, a desire for Korean Americans to realize, you know what, we have to connect with others in our community. Wow. Once again, that's a great Korean American story, but it's not just a great American story, a Korean American story, is it? It's a great American story. We got to be telling these stories because maybe that's a way we can respond to fear and anger. Like, what's worse than someone coming and destroying your entire community, right? But then responding like that, wow, amazing resilience, right? And Koreans can respond that way, and I think they responded that way partially because of their history of being a colonized nation, of going through the Civil War, of growing their own country from one of the poorest countries of the world in 1953 to today, one of the top 10 GDP countries in the world. How did they do that? And by the way, as I talk about these things, it's not that there's not pain points. There are many, by the way, but at the same time, there's also resilience there too. But anyways, letting students to tell the story about the LA civil unrest, right? So they do the research. Actually, I gave them the guidelines of National History Day. I don't know how many of you have been part of National History, but this is a national, very highly respected, approach to kind of telling the story. And there's a lot of different ways to tell the story. They have a podcast category. And I actually had some students who became finalists in the Orange County area. So that was really honest. Going back, can we just play maybe 1 minute of this podcast just to get a vibe of what it sounds like for students to tell the story?
What's up, Turning Point TV? This is CNY with the Daily. And what are we talking about today, Yuri?
Well, today's conversation is about an event that forever altered the course of Korean American history.
Actually, it was a real turning point for all of history, am I right?
Absolutely.
The event's most commonly known as the 1992 LA riots. However, it's also called Saigu in Korean.
Yep, the name translates to April 29th, which is when the riots initially started. It spanned over 6 days until it ended on May 4th.
And the riots weren't peaceful ones either. Thousands of businesses and property were raided, destroyed, and many of them being Korean American owned.
Right, and that really breaks my heart, because the whole event was just a chain of hurt people hurting people that resulted in even more hurt on all ends in the end.
I wholeheartedly agree.
All right, let's go ahead and
now, I think
stop that for now. Channel, but you can kind of, isn't this great? If they can do this, not only are they able to talk about a very complex issue in the United States, I mean, think about whatever else they could do in their career. Content creation, using creativity, using their voice, that's a very valuable skill wherever they will go, right? So you know they're preparing for their future, and it's not complex. Like even right now, we're on Zoom. You could record this. I think it is being recorded, right? And that could become your presentation. You can go to Google Meet. Everyone has a cell phone, right? iMovie, CapCut, Screencastify. You just Google, how do I create a video? And it's not complicated these days, right? In this case, it's just a podcast, just the audio, right? So so you can see, imagine every student choosing a topic that they care about, creating these podcasts, and then putting it in a virtual museum. You can understand that. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where. Hello.
Sorry. You have about 5 minutes left, just to let you know.
Oh, good. Thank you for letting me know. Is that including questions or?
Yes, including the Q&A.
Okay, very good. I'm going to share this one last piece, and then I'll go quickly through the slides and then Q&A. So then what did I do with all those ethnographies, right? Like, I actually worked with our graphic arts and printed out a hard copy of it. And then they presented it to their parents at a resilience event. And they read a dedication. Can you imagine? In front of everybody, they made this ethnography. They give it to their parents publicly. And then they read something like this: "To my dearest Tad, who taught me how to experience life without fear, but with courage. Your encouragement made me feel strong, empowered, and supported." There was not a dry eye in the room as one by one students presented this. This is what you can do. This is now a community schools event, right? You're bringing in the community. A lot of parents, like a lot of folks say, "Oh, the parents, they're not involved, or they are involved," or I don't know what they're saying, but this got a lot of parents in there. Next slide. And then once again, if you go to the model ethnic studies curriculum, there's more detailed lesson plans with PowerPoints, all that, all those different folks I talked about. Next slide. And then this is where you can find that information. If you go to the Korean American Studies Ethnic Foundation website, KSEF, a lot of those lessons are there. Once again, it has the PowerPoints, lesson plans, and everything, so you could just teach whatever you want, whichever lesson is interesting for you. Be curious and just go with one. And then if you're interested in the ethnographies and the Shijo poem and all that stuff, I have the channel to kind of give some examples of that. All right, I think we're there now. Any questions? Any thoughts? Comments?
So will you be doing the class again this coming school year?
Yes. So there's been so much interest in this class. But you saw that first video where we saw like NBC News covering the story, NPR, Korea Times. It's all over Korean media. They love this class. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm nervous to teach a class like this." I'm telling you, if you do it the right way, everyone loves it. Everyone loves it. I'll tell you though, I understand, because I was a little nervous to teach this class. I thought it could be connected with some of the tension around ethnic studies, CRT, all this. So I was a little nervous to initially go there because I didn't, I'm respected in this area, and so I was nervous it would have a negative effect, right? But you remember from the beginning, I didn't want to respond out of fear and anger, but love and wisdom. I thought this was a loving response to a very ugly situation happening. And so it's been well received. So yes, we will be continuing this course in the Anaheim Union High School District, but there's so many other districts that are also interested in this now. And maybe some of you out there are thinking, you know what, maybe this would be a cool class for your district as well. But even if you don't go full class, just do some of the lessons, begin there. And I think you're gonna find a lot of value.
Hi, Dr. Jeff Kim. So Hanny and I are students currently attending Cypress High School.
Yes,
And
Anaheim. Is this Cypress Anaheim?
yes.
Yay!
And recently we had the opportunity, thanks to Miss Sung Kim, we had the opportunity to create a Korean class in our school as well. And I felt like through your presentation, it was very enlightening because, like you said, like it's really important for us to know our backgrounds and not only the language, but like where we come from and why we need to learn and all of this. Because even us as Korean Americans, second generations being here, it's a really big struggle. So we just wanted to appreciate the work you're doing for our community.
Thank you, Henny. I know for myself, I definitely didn't create this course just for me, but it was for folks like you, for the next generation to pave the way. I'm just holding the door open. I'm probably not the best person even to do this work, but I'm ready to do my part though and open the door. And the rest of you guys are going to go through this door and do amazing things. So thank you for letting me know a little bit of your story. And go Anaheim Union High School District.
Dr. Kim, I have a question.
Yes.
Are you the only one teacher who's doing this class down there, or do you know anybody who's doing similar work in Northern California, like a Sacramento area?
That was the thing when I first started creating this course. I wish I had a little bit more models to look at, but I didn't see it out there. That's why I had to create. When I created the Korean American Studies course, it wasn't that I wanted to be the first. I was hoping there was already something there, but there was nothing. So I looked around and I go, oh, there's Korean studies, Korean history, and there's also American history, but not Korean American history. So I didn't see that in a lot of places. So, but fortunately, in a model ethnic studies curriculum, that's where some of those lessons come out. But then I incorporated, in addition to that, some of those ethnography pieces, right? The poetry, the art, the podcasting. So that is something I added to the course, but I wouldn't say I got that from another place.
Wow. Are you willing to come up here, Sacramento, to train other teachers? I mean it.
Oh, well, thank you for your interest. I have the channel to where I talk a lot about the projects, and if there's ever an opportunity, I think it is very important for me myself to do my part to tell the story and do something good with my story. And once again, it wasn't just for me that I created this course, but for all Americans.
Thank you.
Dr. Jeff Kim will present as the keynote speaker at the ICANN conference, International Korean Educators Network, in December this year. So many teachers can come and listen his creative and inspiring lecture.
Can you share the information on chat?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Kim. I was wondering if do you teach at Oxford campus and online, like through CVA, the course?
Sure. So I have an instructional coaching role in the district. So actually some of my work is outside of the classroom supporting teachers. But this work was so important to me, I decided I wanted to put together this course. And the only way that I can do that is through CVA, Cambridge Virtual Academy. So I will be the instructor for that course. They may have other courses like this, but I'll probably not be the instructor. But I would love to have been your teacher. So if you're thinking maybe going online, I would love to be your teacher.
Okay, thank you.
All right, looks like there are no other questions in the chat, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeff Kim. Your presentation is remarkably creative and inspiring. It is the best lecture that I have ever listened. Okay.
Well, President Sun, thank you for your leadership. Some of the approaches, lessons came from this space right here, from your workshops, learning from you, your wisdom, your advice, all the speakers you came in. I couldn't have done the work alone. So Isaac Newton once said, if I can see further, it was because I was standing on the shoulders of giants. President Sun, Jenny Shim, all those people with ICANN, you guys are giants.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.